You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Schuman, and before we formally begin, I would like to note for the record that I will serve as the acting chair for today's meeting. I now call to order the meeting of the directors of New York Convention Center Development Corporation for Wednesday, January 24, 2024. I'd like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. The directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions at any time. We welcome public comment on today's agenda items. I will note for the record that the public was given the opportunity to comment on the agenda items by submitting their written comments by 3 p.m. yesterday, and no comments were received. I will also note that we do not have any members of the public attending today's meeting. Before we begin with the substantive portion of the meeting, I would like to ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on today's agenda. If so, I would ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure on the record at this time. We will then be sure that you may recuse yourselves from any discussion or vote with regard to such item or items. Hearing no conflicts, I will now ask Rebecca Pellegrini, President of the Corporation, to start things off with the President's report. I will note for the record that this item is being presented for your information only and no vote will be required. Rebecca.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since our last board meeting, CCDC has been busy on a number of initiatives and negotiations pertaining to the management of various ongoing projects at and around Javits. As you know, the final settlement with the joint venture of Lendlease and Turner pertaining to the expansion project was concluded, claims were settled, and waivers have been executed. As mentioned during the last meeting, there were a handful of items left to be done pertaining to warranty claims and construction deficiencies, neither of which affect safety or operations of the facility, and so I wanted to update you on where we're at with those items. Lendlease and Turner have addressed all warranty claims, and that matter is considered closed at this time. With regards to the construction deficiencies, CCDC has all the requisite operating permits in place. We have continued to work with DASNY and FDNY to secure the final permanent certificate of occupancy. And significant progress has been made over the course of the last few months. Lendlease and Turner performed the work that fulfilled their obligation to address construction deficiencies in the new truck marshaling building, and that work was performed to the satisfaction of FDNY. CCDC, in partnership with CCOC, continues to address a small number of outstanding concerns that primarily pertain to the South Building. We're working toward resolution of those outstanding items and are hopeful that within the next few months we'll get final FDNY approval. As discussed previously, CCDC anticipates 2 site dispositions, Site K and the former truck marshaling yard. With respect to Site K, a request for proposals was issued in July of last year. And in keeping with New York State's initiatives to address the housing crisis, the RFP called for proposals which include residential or mixed use development with a minimum of 30% affordable housing units. Selection criteria includes the project uses, benefit to the surrounding communities, sustainable building practices, the financial offer, financial feasibility, and respondent experience and qualifications, and MWBE developer ownership in the project. We had a robust response to the RFP, a number of very interesting proposals to contemplate, and CCDC, ESD, and CCOC are still in the review process of those proposals, and we will be performing our due diligence over the course of the next few months. CCDC also intends to dispose of the former truck marshalling yard site, although there is no timetable established for that disposition at this time. That concludes our updates for now. I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your report, Rebecca. Continuing with the agenda, Rebecca will now request authorization for the corporation to increase its compensation rates for outside legal counsel. Rebecca, when you're ready.
Sure, thank you. At the Empire State Development Board meeting on September 21st of 2023, the ESD directors approved an increase to the rate of compensation paid to our outside law firms. ESD's prior rates were considerably lower than the going rates for many of the law firms utilized by the corporation, particularly those firms located in New York City. Law firms are beginning to decline to be considered for ESD work because in their judgment, the corporation's rates are simply too low. While the overall quality of the corporation's representation has remained acceptable, ESD staff was concerned that the quality of representation would become increasingly difficult to procure absent a rate increase. ESD staff proposed this rate structure after researching the outside counsel rates paid by other New York State public benefit corporations and authorities, and finding that the corporation's current maximum rates were significantly lower than others. The increased rate schedule is included in your materials, of course, that show the previous rate schedule and the proposed rate schedule. On occasion, it may be advisable to compensate firms at a blended rate. The ESD directors approve a blended rate up to $700 per hour, whereby all attorneys are paid at the same rate per hour, excluding the category of law clerk and paralegal. This is sometimes necessary as a way of attracting top-flight law firms and is at the discretion of ESD's general counsel. So CCDC directors are requested to authorize CCDC to apply the new maximum compensation rate presented in the materials on a retroactive basis to any currently outstanding legal invoices for legal services rendered for CCDC on September 21st, 2023 through the present. We are also asking that you approve the blended rates of up to $700 per hour if determined to be necessary and at the discretion of the general counsel. And we are requesting the authorization to execute amendments to the existing legal retainer agreements to modify the compensation rates, should those be approved.
So can I ask you a question? So I don't understand the retroactivity to September 21st. Could you explain that? And what the order of magnitude is? Did they do the work knowing that there would be a approval retroactively increasing their rates?
No, that was presented to us or asked of us recently. We have really one law firm at this point, Venable, that's working on CCDC's initiatives at this point. And because they are working on other projects with ESD, they made the ask to, as of September 21st, they are able to bill at a separate rate, a different rate, the new rate that was approved by the ESD board. And so they're asking to have any invoices that are outstanding. We wouldn't actually go all the way back to September. I think there's one bill that we have that has not been paid, and there is another bill that we're expecting we have not received yet. The order of magnitude would be approximately $5,000.
Oh, so it's negligible.
Yes, it's not a great deal of money. So,
Are there any other questions or comments from the board?
I move the motion to increase the rates.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you. The motion carries. Rebecca will also present today's final item, an authorization to enter into an easement and restriction agreement with the City of New York in connection with the Javits Center's renovation and expansion civic and land use improvement project. Rebecca?
thank you. The City of New York owns a vacant and undeveloped real property located at 495 11th Avenue, which is the southwest corner of 40th Street and 11th Avenue, and sits directly adjacent to the easternmost wall of the truck marshalling building. This area is sometimes referred to as the former slaughterhouse site and is currently used for police parking. New York City is planning a mixed-use project on the site that will include a hotel with up to 755 keys, along with 350 units of permanently affordable housing. The development will also include a grocery store, office and retail space, and an NYPD parking garage. The project is close to obtaining final Department of Buildings new building approval. DOB is requiring an executed light and air easement and restrictive declaration with CCDC before issuing final new building approval for the city's project. And so to that end, New York City is seeking from CCDC a light and air easement west of the New York City premises, beginning at or above the highest point of the expansion project's new truck marshalling facility, which is the roof line of the greenhouse that sits on top of that facility, with a horizontal dimension of the easement measuring 60 feet in depth and 197 feet in width. New York City is also seeking a restrictive declaration that CCDC will not develop a 30-foot at-grade portion of 39th Street directly south of the New York City premises. The restrictive declaration will allow for the establishment of an outdoor plaza to be utilized and maintained by the hotel component of the city's project. Pursuant to CCDC's 1979 enabling legislation, CCDC exists for, among other reasons, to renovate and expand Javits, including the development of one or more hotels adjacent to the expanded facility. The easement and restriction will contribute to the development of hotel accommodations adjacent to the recent Javits expansion. Further, the UDC Act that established ESD, notes that ESD was created to promote the sound growth and development of municipalities through, among other things, redevelopment of underutilized or vacant properties. And additionally, the 350 units of permanently affordable housing that New York City's project will produce is in keeping with New York State's initiatives to address the current housing crisis. Therefore, the purpose of the proposed dispositions is consistent with the purpose, mission, and governing statute of both ESD and CCDC. And to that end, CCDC would grant the easement and the restriction to New York City without compensation as an accommodation to assist in the development of the New York City premises. The directors are requested to grant authorization to enter into the easement agreement and restrictive declaration with the City of New York and take all related actions.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
So certainly the goals of this are laudable and important, so there's no question about that. But shouldn't we have some proviso that this should be subject to making sure it doesn't interfere with Javits operations, or that the CCOC board takes a look at it, just some benchmark before the easement is approved, that the CCOC or the management of Javits knows that this will not in any way materially affect the operations of Javits? I think it's just a proviso.
Or if it does, what control Javits has over it, which is my concern. And since Alan is here, I wonder if you could elaborate on any operational concerns that you would have about this.
Well, let me just provide an answer first.
Yes.
And then, so
It's going to be a legal answer.
So,
Yes.
so the way we structured this or are thinking about it is kind of a multi-step process. I mean, the first step was to grant the city approval for these easements and restrictions. However, at some point in the not too distant future, we'll come back to you and present an access agreement that we've been working on with the city that will, govern the construction and how it has to interface with CCOC's operations. That agreement, while not signed yet, but gives CCOC, the right to review plans and even kind of review and approve things that might affect their operation on a weekly basis during the construction. So, we will come back at a future date with these specific access agreements that definitely affect, CCOC's operations. We're very cognizant of that.
It wouldn't just be during construction, it's also during operation. I mean, whether Javits opens its doors, who's paying for those doors to be covered by security, all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we will.
And we have shared these documents with CCOC as well for their review.
But is this deal contingent upon their approval? You've shared it, but is there a contingency?
The mission we were charged with, hi, I'm Arden Zakla, the Executive Vice President for Real Estate at ESD. The mission we were charged with was making sure that CCOC felt comfortable with these before proceeding. So we've been doing that at every step of the way.
Alan, do you want to?
Sorry, would you mind repeating that?
Me? That we've been charged with.
Maybe before we go, just because I don't know if it's
Sorry,
picking
it
up
might
on
not be
you.
picking up.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
I'll face forward. Forget my back.
Alan will move closer.
I will talk with you face. But we've been charged with facilitating this. This is a furtherance of the governor's priorities on affordable housing, as well as all the economic reasons that Rebecca described in her. So this is an important project for the city and for the state. But at the same time, everybody recognized this has impact on the convention center, and we were charged with making sure that the convention center was part of the conversations of reviewing these documents and making sure that they felt protected. But it is, to your question, it's not they're not a signatory to it.
CCOC will have to sign off on the construction plans
Yes.
for this new building.
But not these documents. They're not signing these documents.
Right.
Correct.
And how about the operational plan once the building is open?
Well, I mean, we are entering into an agreement, an indemnity agreement for the plaza area that will serve as both an entrance for CCOC employees and also will provide a public space and access to this new hotel. Where we are, so that is kind of goes along with the restrictive declaration. In terms of operations, I mean, operations of the new hotel and city building is not, necessarily within our purview to control once it's, done and open. I mean, it is right next to it, but, I don't think that we can kind of.
I haven't seen any updated plans for it, but there certainly was a plan to connect the hotel to Javits, which would then imply there would be an access point from one.
That's
You
very-
want to describe
well,
that? You
that's
want to
very-
describe that? Yeah.
There is this proposal that the city would like to, there's a proposal that the developer put forth to maybe get agreement to build some kind of sky bridge from the new hotel to Javits. It's very speculative at this point. I mean, we haven't agreed to anything necessarily.
We're not reviewing those
It's
documents as a,
It's an agreement to come back to talk about
But
it.
that would be a
Right.
normal thing. I mean, you look around the country, convention centers are often,
Right. But
connected
it's
that
just
way.
an agreement to,
If we were to pursue that further, we would definitely have to have the right language in there about CCOC's operations and hours and, control over opening and
right,
closing.
something that will be coordinated closely.
Yeah.
Yes.
We definitely recognize that.
I think listening to this conversation, it does seem like there is a two-step process that you're building into it, and I'm
Yes.
comfortable with that. But I would like the minutes to reflect the conversation that is being held, because the conversation is one of reasonableness, and it basically is one that says
Agreed.
we're not running this through without there being a process, that the easement approval is just the first step, and the operationalization is something that would be part of a discussion that would involve the management of Javits and the CCOC board. And I'm comfortable voting for this if the minutes reflect the conversation we just had.
And just to clarify two things. One, we're talking about an air and light easement,
Yes.
really, and it's the city who's doing the development of their hotel.
Their
It's just a
property,
question of, they want to make sure when they build the hotel that we're not going to block their light and air, and that there's
Yes.
use of the plaza, right? So,
Correct.
But if I could just raise a point there. The last time we saw a plan, which was several years ago, there were concerns on the part of our facilities management team that the way in which the building was designed would actually deposit large amounts of rainfall onto our existing roof. And that, to my knowledge, has never been addressed since. So my concern is there's an awful lot of things being kind of broadly signed off on here without any specific detail, and there are already things that are of concern. I think we should have a little more information about exactly what the plans are before we get to the point of saying, yes, we're okay with them.
Well, I had a second question that relates to this, dealing with SECRA. So I think the board's being asked to find that there's no significant effect on the environment here. And again, how are we scoping today's proposal so that we are not deciding, for example, whether rainfall will have an effect on the plaza, things like that?
So the New York City did go through a review process. They went through ULURP and received the approval for that in fall of 2021. So they have done their...
Including the associated environmental.
Right.
The city completed the required environmental review it had to do for this project. I don't know like what, it's a question of would building this. I mean, it may have already been addressed in the SECRA, and I have not looked at all of it at this moment. But of course, it's also a question of would rainfall coming off of a building be considered a significant impact or not? A significant environmental impact. I mean, I assume it has been, covered in the SECRA, and we can pull that information and send it around.
Right. So to my knowledge, it's not my expertise, but SECRA is often an iterative process. So again, I'm trying to scope what the board is being asked to approve today. If we're going forward with the vote today, if we could just be clear that our approval is limited to an easement subject to further either environmental review and potential concerns and/or further evaluation of what this project will involve that could affect the Javits Center. Just trying to make sure we're gauging this.
Yes.
Well, I think that even if we didn't grant these easements, the city could still go ahead and build their building right next to us, with no changes to it. So, there's no kind of environmental aspect of it that changes based on whether or not we grant this light and air. This is an accommodation we're giving. If we don't grant it, they can still build their building as approved. I mean, as I've said, like, we're definitely cognizant of the operational concerns as it goes forward, and if they start to build. However, in terms of environmental impacts, it's not really within our purview to kind of examine that. We'd have to look at what was already studied in the city's SECRA review.
Well, and perhaps, and I think Lee was saying something along these lines earlier, is there in the actual easement grant or legal document any either condition of making sure, whether it's through this board or CCOC or some other entity, that they will be in compliance with any environmental requirements or any other informational conditions coming back to the Javits Center, whichever entity?
Well, I will say that the documents won't be executed obviously until this board gives approval and we feel comfortable in signing it. At the moment, it doesn't kind of reference any of that because it was contemplated that the future access agreement and underpinning agreement for construction would kind of handle most of this operational stuff. However, we can discuss with the city, additional language that would make people feel more comfortable with that.
So
you're suggesting adding a provision to the easement that says that it's in compliance with all, environmental findings?
And will remain so, et cetera. So
I think that is doable, yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like to maybe bring this toward a closure, either you could return at the next meeting with such, or maybe we would pursue a motion today for the resolution, but subject to making sure that any easement documentation is conditioned on whether it's CCDC and or CCOC's receipt of ongoing information from the city and the requirement that they comply with environmental and all other laws.
But it's more than environmental, it's also operational impact. It's not just environmental impact, it's operational impact. I'm very comfortable approving this with the minutes properly reflecting the discussion, which is that this is a two-step process, and that the CCOC board and the management of the Javits Center would be consulted to make sure that this does not have any undue course. I do understand, quite frankly, the objective of both state government and local government to do this housing, except I also know that we spent $1.5 billion rebuilding the Javits Center, which to me is as important, if not more important, than building new housing. So all of this should be accommodated, and I just think from a fiduciary standpoint, if the language, the minutes, whatever reflects this discussion, I'm comfortable.
Okay. Well, I'll ask the executive team, do you wish us to move forward with the vote?
With the conditions?
With
Do you understand the
incorporating this
conditions?
The condition being that signing the easement, it's conditioned on the city being in and remaining in compliance with all environmental findings and requirements, and an obligation to consult with CCDC and CCOC on operational issues.
And that we come back for the second step. For the
And then to come back for the board's approval of the access agreement and the Sky Bridge, if that ever
If that happens.
So absent any further questions or comments, do I see a motion
I think a motion.
and a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And no opposed? Thank you. The motion with those conditions carries. There being no further business, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I put some short ones.